Hello everyone, I'm Pratush Brahma. I'm a PhD student in University of Florida and I'm working under Dr. Saint Mary Colette. Now, today I'll be talking about my research. My research question here is to predict density dependent patterns of reproduction using dynamic state variable models. Now, the overall goal of my research is to understand sexual selection, and sexual selection is influenced by several factors like environmental condition, mate quality, predation, operational sex ratio, and population density. Now, population density is a very interesting factor because any variation in population density causes a variation in mate availability and per capita resource availability. And the variation in these factors causes a variation in reproductive behavior as a response. An example was shown by Coco and Rankin's paper in 2006, where they showed that male-male competition and a female choosiness increases as the density increases. And this can be attributed to the fact that there are more males to compete with for every male to gain access to females. And since there are more males, the females have more options to choose from. Now, the overarching question here is to understand how does the optimal reproductive behavior change for males and females through a breeding season across different densities. So, to understand this, we have taken a dynamic state variable modeling approach. This is an optimality approach where we maximize the current and expected future fitness to find the optimum strategy. We construct two different models, a male and a female model, and we look for optimizing different reproductive behavior such as mate competition, mate choice, parental care, offspring quality or quantity, and other different pre-mating and post-mating events. Now, let's get into the male model dynamics. So here we use the physiological energy state of the male as well as the time span of the breeding season as the two states that we use to maximize the reproductive behavior. Each male individual has the first choice to either compete or not to compete in a competition. And if they compete, there will be a winner or loser with a given probability. And regardless of whether they choose to compete or not compete, they have the second choice whether if they can attempt to mate or not. Now, if they attempt to mate, based on what they did previously, if they were winners of a competition or losers of a competition or did not take part in a competition, they would have different chances of successful mating. And after successful mating, they would have the third choice of whether or not they have to provide care or not provide care to the offspring. In any given time step, they can choose not to do any of these reproductive options and just simply forage to gain access to more resources. So in a nutshell, we'd be looking at 5 different strategy sets and as a combination of the 3 choices that I explained above. So a male can either compete, attempt to mate and provide care. They can not compete and still attempt to mate and provide care. They can simply forage. They can compete, attempt to mate and do not provide care. Or they cannot compete, they will not compete and yet attempt to mate and not provide care if they get to mate. So moving on to the female model dynamics, here we have taken 3 different states: the physiological energy state of the individual, the time span of the breeding season, and the quality of male or female encounters. So if you look at the strategies, a female can choose to sample a male, and then with different probabilities she can either not encounter a male or she can encounter a male with different qualities. So there are different probabilities of encountering males of different qualities. Now, when they encounter a male, they can either choose to mate with the male and care for offspring, or mate with a male and do not care for offspring. And based on their care or not care, and based on the quality of the male, the offspring value will change accordingly. And as done in the male model, at any time step, they can choose to simply forage and not do any of the reproductive options. So we'll be looking at just those 4 female model strategies: that sampling, foraging, mating and caring, and mating and not caring for offsprings. Now moving on to the assumptions, every model has a set of assumptions. These are some common density dependent assumptions that we are taken in our models. So the per capita resource intake for every time step is inversely proportional to the population density. In the male model, we assume that the general probability of winning a competition increases in low density due to less competition as compared to higher densities. In the female model, the probability of female not encountering a male increases in lower density. Additionally, the proportion of encountering the male quality in the female model is same in all densities. Now, some of the specific assumptions in the male model are competition winners have a higher chances of mating compared to the chances of losers, as well as the ones who did not take part in competition. The offspring survival will be higher when care is provided by a male than when it is not. Some female model assumptions are like there are 4 different qualities of male available overall for the female to choose from, ranging on a scale from 1 to 4, with 1 being the poorest quality and 4 being the greatest quality male. And each time step is equivalent to half of that of every time step in the male model, so that the female can only sample a maximum of 1 male in a single time step. Now let's talk about how to interpret the male model output. So before we understand what's happening in this plot, I like to give some color references. So the blue color represents compete, attempting to mate and providing care. The green represents no competition but attempting to mate and providing care. The cream color represents no competition but yet attempting to mate and no providing care to the offsprings, and the yellow represents just the foraging. The left panel represents lower density and the right panel represents higher density. Now, if we look at the model, we can see that there is more foraging and low cost behavior for lower energy states in high density scenario, and there is more reproductive behavior in lower densities due to greater availability of resources. Now for the female model, it's more complicated because we have 4 different panels in lower density as well as higher density. And the colors are, the red color represents foraging, yellow represents sampling, green represents mating and caring, and orange represents mating and not caring. And from what we interpret here, it's mostly few of the things are similar to the male model, that there is more foraging for lower energy states in high density scenario, and there is more repetitive behavior in lower densities due to greater availability of resources. Now there is also greater sampling for lower male quality, and there is more mating and caring as the male quality increases. So the conclusions so far are that resources are not limiting reproductive behavior at lower densities. There is more foraging at higher densities as resources start limiting reproductive behavior for lower energy states. Males tend not to invest in caring for offspring as the density increases due to lower availability of resources. On the other hand, females tend to invest more towards caring as the density increases. So since we are still exploring this, we'll try further to understand why this happens. And as the male quality increases, a female puts more effort in mating with the male and caring for offspring. Now the future direction would be to add some complexities like cannibalism, reduce survivorship of offspring with no care at higher densities, and incorporate male-female model interactions using potential game theory applications like Hogdove game and iterated prisoner's dilemma. Thank you for listening to me. I'll be ready for any further questions.